As I am writing this, the most recent episode of The Owl House was Hunting Palisman, in which we finally learn about the true identity of the Golden Guard, who we first saw back in Separate Tides, the first episode of Season 2. In reality, although he appears so imposing at first, he's just a kid named Hunter. This is not to say that he is entirely unremarkable. He is quite snarky, for one, and his power and skill as a witch are real, as we saw in Separate Tides. But he is nonetheless distressingly normal without the mask, and without the staff that gives him his powers. In that respect, he is not so dissimilar from Luce. They are both rather ordinary people living in a magical world that would put them at a distinct disadvantage if it were not for two major factors. The first being their work ethic, their desire to learn everything there is to know about this world and master parts of the rich and strange history of this world that other people don't have to master because they can just rely on their traditional magical powers. They don't have to make all these discoveries that Luce and Hunter have made. And number two, both Luce and Hunter have had an experienced adult to take them in and mentor them. These adults provided them stability and security in their lives. Now, none of this is to say that these parental figures are the same. They are clearly not. Ida is quite open and encouraging to Luce. In fact, though I don't want to dismiss Luce's mother, Camilla, Ida is probably the best guardian Luce could have at this point in her life. Camilla loves Luce very deeply, but she's also kind of overprotective of Luce. Ida is different. She cares deeply for Luce, and if Luce really gets into deep trouble, Ida will be there for her, but she's also willing to let Luce figure things out by herself. She's willing to let Luce experiment and even fail sometimes. And because of that, Luce is able to learn and grow and really become more independent. Belos, however, is the complete opposite in his relationship with Hunter, the Golden Guard. Belos is controlling. He is unresponsive to any of Hunter's ideas. He doesn't even really want to listen to Hunter. He just wants Hunter to obediently obey all of his commands. Now, because Avatar: The Last Airbender is such a common reference point among my generation, I've seen quite a few people comparing Belos and Hunter to the relationship between Ozai and Zuko in Avatar. Now, as someone who has studied Avatar a lot and even wrote a book about it, I can quibble with the comparison. For one, Belos seems to at least care about Hunter, if only for Belos' own selfish purposes, and as far as we thus know, Belos has not done anything unspeakably horrible to Hunter in the same way that Ozai burned half of Zuko's face. But the comparison is nonetheless quite sensible. Like Zuko, Hunter feels that he owes a lot of what he has and his position in this society to his father figure. He believes that he owes his father figure respect and service. His own desires are so thoroughly subsumed to the desires of the father figure that it is difficult for the character to even respect the validity of their own desires. They're so accustomed to what they believe being wrong and what the father figure believes being correct and the right path to take going forward. Now, both in the case of Hunter and in the case of Zuko, it's easy for us here in our privileged position as audience members to want these characters to break from the rule of their father figure and emerge from the shadow of that father figure. But in both cases, it's not that easy. And we should acknowledge that. These characters have attached so much of their identity to the hierarchy that the father figure is at the top of, that they know that if they abandon the father figure, if they rebelled and abandoned this hierarchy, they would have no idea who they are anymore. They'd be lost, isolated, and alone. Now, I must reiterate how average the Golden Guard looks without his mask. He's nothing special. That they decide to make this a story point is not coincidental. Hunter, without the identity of the Golden Guard, has very little value in the society. The members of the Emperor's Coven don't recognize him without the Golden Guard disguise, and so they treat him like a spoiled child. They give him no respect. And though I hate to fixate on something so ostensibly superficial, I do believe it's worth noting that Hunter is not exactly a Zuko in terms of looks or athleticism. Based on my experience talking to a lot of people in the Avatar fandom, I've seen that a lot of people were attracted to Zuko when they watched this show as a kid. And that's not unreasonable. Even with his scar, he's not ugly by any means. He has great genes. The entire family, him, Ozai, Ursa, and Azula, are very beautiful. But also, he is an incredible athlete. He's one of the most skilled martial artists in Avatar. Even without his firebending, he's very adroit with his hands and his muscles and the motions of his body. As we see in the Zuko Alone episode, and also at any time when he dons the disguise of the Blue Spirit, Zuko, without firebending, is still a good enough martial artist to outcompete any non-bender we see in the show. If bending suddenly disappeared in Avatar, Zuko would still be one of the most physically threatening characters in this show. He has trained his body into that of a genuinely great martial artist, which is impressive considering that he lacks the natural talent of Azula. Hunter, however, is quite ordinary. He's not ugly and he's not unathletic, but with his floppy hair and ashen face, he's kind of awkward and gangly. He's not an Adonis figure, which is important to note because a lot of these Byronic heroes, including Zuko, including Lord Byron himself, very much were this more Adonis-like figure. All of this is to say that the Golden Guard is a respected member of the Emperor's Coven and one of the most powerful witches on the Boiling Isles. But Hunter, without the identity of the Golden Guard to rely upon, is just an awkward teenager who can't perform magic without his staff. Because of the discrepancy between who he is as the Golden Guard and who he is when he is just Hunter, it is quite reasonable that he attaches so much of his identity to the Golden Guard, that he clutches that position like he does, and doesn't usually allow people to see who he is outside of that position. But we should also note that unless Hunter is able to release himself from the position of the Golden Guard and stand on his own as Hunter, his long-term survival is questionable. he will not have the opportunity to change for the better. Now, I must admit that I do not know what Emperor Belos' plans for Hunter are, considering that we, as of my writing and recording this video, are only 6 episodes into the 2nd season of The Owl House, and I will not be so arrogant as to presume I know everything that is going to happen. But I think it is safe to assume that these plans are not going to be good for Hunter, considering the ominous references to the Titan's plan for Hunter. If Hunter is to escape whatever ill designs Belos more than likely has for him, he will have to leave the Emperor's Coven and leave his identity as the Golden Guard, which will more than likely mean joining Luce and Ida. The Owl House is, at its heart, a show about the awesome power of familial bonds, how these bonds at their best can heal us and provide us comfort and emotional sustenance, and how at their worst these bonds can break us and leave us more isolated than ever. For a character like Amity, her path forward is pretty straightforward. She needs to break away from the more controlling elements of her family and embrace the parts of herself that have been unlocked through her relationship with Luce. Of course, for Amity, that was easier than it would be for Hunter. Amity may not have the support of her mother, but her father seems mostly accepting, and her siblings are very much on her side, helping to facilitate her transformation from bitter, lonely perfectionist who doesn't want other people to know that she's bitter and lonely, to kind-hearted, compassionate, love-struck optimist who's not afraid to ask out a crush and not afraid to embrace her more spontaneous and idealistic sides against the wishes of Adelia, her mother. Hunter doesn't really have anyone like that. He doesn't have siblings. He doesn't really have a strong support system outside of Belos. This is what I really appreciate about the Owl House. It understands that no two familial bonds are exactly the same, and that there are no obvious didactic answers to what to do about one's bonds with one's family. Think about Luce and Ida, who, despite their vast differences in age, have somewhat similar relationships with their family in that they don't really necessarily get along with their family. They're the weirder ones. They're the outsiders. They love their family, and they want to help out their family, but they're more comfortable when they're with each other in this unconventional but really beautiful kind of surrogate mother-daughter bond that they've created. So because the show is willing to investigate how tense and how raw and how uncomfortable some of these familial bonds can be and how there's no real definitive answers to that, I'm interested to see where they go with Hunter. It would make sense for him that he would cling to his position with Belos as the Golden Guard, but for his benefit, it's absolutely essential that he does not do so. So thank you all for watching. If you liked what you saw today, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Donate to my Patreon if you can and you want to see more videos like this. Keep watching The Owl House. I've really been fascinated by the directions the show has taken recently, and I can't wait to see where it goes from here. What will it do with Hunter? How will it develop his relationship with Belos? How will it develop Belos? I want to know more about him and why he decided to take Hunter in the first place. As the show progresses, it seems like Hunter is going to take an increasingly important role in it, so I'm interested to see what choices he ends up making. So anyway, tune in soon for my next analysis. It will be coming soon. That I promise you. Thank you all again. Adios, comrades.